When does free speech end and hate speech begin? Good question. The focus of late has been on speech within the workplace. To discuss employee and employer rights with regard to hate speech are in studio mental health professional Mike Veny, who is joining us again, criminal justice professor John Pataikes from Seton Hall University. Also on hand is Alex Isbell. He's an immigration attorney from the law firm of Solo, Isbell, and Palladino. And from our Washington, D.C. studios, attorney Tom Harrington, and he is with the Employment Law Group based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, again, thank you for joining us. You know, hate speech is out there. It's been there since the dawn of man. Everybody seems to think they're better than somebody else. I think it's been supercharged by social media, and maybe, Mike, you could talk to that issue.
Absolutely. Social media allows people to passive-aggressively stand behind a wall and speak their mind when say things that they wouldn't say publicly to other people. And it's given people a voice who don't usually speak up. So I think it's a real problem nowadays, especially in the workplace, when you have employees who go home and say something hateful on social media, and then the company now has all this bad press because of it.
Well, on the other side of the issue, people might say, hey, it's my right to free speech. If I'm talking about it in the privacy of my home or with friends, it really doesn't matter. But there's a real fine line, because I think there are more hate crimes now, we live in the New York metropolitan area, than I've ever seen. And sometimes people would say, well, maybe it wasn't a hate crime. This guy just attacked another guy, wanted his wallet.
Yeah, well, I think it gets a lot more attention now. Everybody's, I think, much more sensitive toward it. You know, there's some talk about, are we going a little bit too much politically correct or whatever, so people are reporting things quickly. I've noticed on college campuses there's been a lot more challenge of the administration, tuition rates, et cetera, you know, you know, there's that free speech, but on the other hand, it was stopping other students from going to class. They had to suspend classes for several days. So, you know, I think, you know, there's just a lot of attention on it now.
Alex Isbell, you're on the front lines of this, because there's a lot of talk, especially in the presidential election, and by some people maybe not as enlightened as we are, that, you know, the immigrant is the problem, the illegal alien, and I'm sure that ramps up their targeting of them. Are you seeing that?
Sure. I mean, the problem of the other has been a political problem of time immemorial. It's always easier to try to blame whatever ails you on someone who looks different from you or speaks a different language than you do. And I think that immigrants are, unfortunately, an easy target for people who want to drum up passion among their supporters.
Especially in the politicians,
yes,
unfortunately, we should say. Let's go to Tom Harrington. Tom, in the workplace, what are the rules with regard to hate speech? What can and can you not say?
Well, you can't say anything that attacks somebody because they belong to a protected class, including race, gender, disability, age, national origin, or religion. And if you say anything offensive regarding their membership in any protected class, there are a host of federal and state and local laws that protect them from that kind of speech in the workplace.
It must be very difficult in the workplace, especially if you're just starting, you sort of want to fit in, and maybe you'll laugh at something that is maybe inappropriate just to maybe keep your job and fit in. Do you see that happening in times?
Yeah, we see it all the time. You know, I think I would note that I think people are more careful in their speech at work than probably they are anywhere else. So certainly we recognize there's no shortage of bigots in the workplace who are saying all sorts of things in their private life and on social media, but they may be a little more careful at work. But if anything it touches a line or is offensive to you as a worker, you should complain about it and bring it to the attention of supervisors and HR so that you have the protection of having complained about it in the first place.
Tom, what is the most common form of hate speech in the workplace that you see?
The most common forms of hate speech in the workplace?
Yes.
I think in the current political environment, they are those comments directed at migrants and immigrants, and the types of things that Donald Trump is getting away with saying on the campaign trail. If you have a colleague or a supervisor in the workplace who's saying things similar to what Mr. Trump is saying, I think you'd have a legitimate basis for complaining to HR that your coworker is creating an offensive work environment and is violating the law.
Mike Veny, is this in some way, shape, or form also a health issue? I mean, a mental health issue?
Absolutely, because mental health in the workplace is becoming a much more popular topic. I am hired to speak in workplaces sometimes, and we were talking about it before the segment, that if we were all in the workplace and it was known that I struggled with mental health challenges,
Right.
and you two were in the corner talking about, you know, how you can't stand crazy people or working with crazy people, I'm going to be offended, I'm going to feel uncomfortable, and then I'm going to have to go to HR about it.
Well, let's go to the legal team here.
Well, and in terms of a health issue, it may very well be people who are already the most vulnerable people in the workplace who are the victims of these comments and attacks. And they may be less likely than anyone else to go talk to a manager or a supervisor because they are fear of losing their jobs.
Do you find that a lot? Or somebody reaches a point where they just can't take it anymore, and then you find out that it's been going on for quite a while.
You know, usually if it's been going on for quite a while when someone complains about it.
How does the criminal justice look at this, John?
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of times people are hesitant to go to HR about it because it sort of targets them to some extent. They're going to have to testify. Then other people in the organization may pinpoint them as, you know, complainers or whatever. So unfortunately, I think a lot of times they don't go to report it, actually, you know.
Well, what if you just let, and I'll throw this out to the panel, what if you just let the offending party know that that is no longer acceptable and you will not accept it? Take the matter into your own hands.
I think self-help is a dangerous road to go down.
Really, I disagree. I actually think that it's important to run to conflict. In society, people don't do that enough. In the workplace, we hide behind, you know, I had a problem with him at work today, I'm going to file a little complaint about it, rather than going up to him like a human being and saying, hey, look, I feel offended because. So I think that's something that people need to bring back into culture more, running directly to conflict.
I worked at a place once, I'm Italian-American, there was a derogatory comment. I took the gentleman aside, I told him it was no longer acceptable, he apologized later on, and that was the end of it. I could have easily gone to HR, but I didn't. I think maybe that's the path that we should take. Let's go back to Tom Harrington. Tom, should people handle this one-on-one if they can before this even happens, before they go to HR?
I think generally if that's possible, that's a good idea, but I think to some extent it depends on how severe the comments are. If you've got a coworker or even worse, a supervisor who's using the N-word or some comment that there's universal agreement is beyond the pale in the workplace, I mean, you don't have an obligation to try and, you know, educate somebody who is that ignorant and making those kinds of comments. Go to the supervisor and go to HR, but if you can work it out with a coworker, that's great, but, you know, that's not going to be possible in a lot of situations.
Should you keep a record of all the instances in which you were insulted?
Absolutely. The more documentation you have, and the more often you can show it occurs, you know, the more clear the company's responsibility is to address it. And once you bring it to the company's attention, they have a legal obligation to take action to ensure that it doesn't happen going forward, either by moving the offended employee or by moving the offensive coworker or supervisor.
All right, we want to thank you.
Or firing them.
We want to thank you, Tom Harrington from the Employment Law Group based in Washington, D.C. And all of you gentlemen, we've run out of time. Really interesting conversation. We appreciate you stopping by.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us on Fresh Outlook. For all the great and talented people behind the scenes, and of course our guest this week, I'm Frank Cipolla. We'll see you next time.